Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness. I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Trees. I'm taking on 3 of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
Saturday with Renee. Yeah, what's up, world? Welcome back. Saturdays with Renee with the special guest, the main man himself.
Where's Kamal? You just don't read, beloved.
I don't know where Kamal is. What's up, Renee? What's up, Hiram? What's up, Remixers? We don't know where Kamal is. He always late. He's just always late.
He is a mess. Do we
he just stays
I switch
late.
myself around here. I'm all jacked up. Do we need to text him? Because you know he be.
Yeah, we should probably reach out. And then meanwhile, I'm gonna put the support links for Daruba back up there, folks, while you're watching. If you got some the ability to send him some love, please do. And make sure you like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, all the good stuff. What's up, Hiram? How you feeling, man?
I'm good. I was worried I wasn't gonna be able to make it. My mom surprised us with a visit from Arizona, and so I had to run to Connecticut, which is I'm at my aunt's crib, as you can see.
Oh, okay, right on. All right, peace to the family.
The auntie crib background going on.
And I want all the world to know that it took me haranguing Hiram in a way that he giggled.
He is known as a giggler, though. He does like to giggle. That's what we know Hiram for.
I had to harangue.
They called me in Gotham City. The
giggler.
Oh,
that
man.
Could
so
work.
What's going on, people? What's going on? Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
So, as I explained when I invited you, and this is something that, we talk about a lot on here, is getting people to go find an organization, right? And because we talk about it so much, this idea of go find an organization, I felt like it might be useful to talk to people who run, are part of, do training on the ground, do the whole thing, so that people can understand what they should actually be looking for, what they should be considering, what they should have in mind as they're going through this process of determining how they're going to move forward and find a place where they can actually participate. So I don't know why I look at the chat. David Silberg gets on my damn nerves.
What if the books were props? Yeah, that's cold.
Well, speaking of Gotham City, basically I can just open up the bookshelves and they go down into my back cave. So they are props. You know what I'm saying?
I can't. So me personally, I've run the gamut with organizations, and what I find a lot is like I sign up, I get involved, and it's like a disaster zone on the inside, right? There's no plan. If they even have like a means of communication within the organization, there's nobody paying attention to what's going on there. So there's always something, right? And I've been in a few orgs that I've been in for multiple years now that seem to have it together. So it's doable. I'm not saying that to say like you can't find one, but I know for me, it has not been an easy task finding places to really be involved in, because it's rough. It's rough out there, and a lot of people, quite frankly, are just full of shit, right? Like a lot of people. When's the last time y'all heard a house phone ring?
That's a good question.
Exactly.
Or where it wasn't like somebody's ringtone, like they got some old style phone ringtone on their cell phone or something.
That is gotta be. That is a.
Oh no, that's legit.
Phone.
Oh no, that's legit.
Look,
I'm saying I haven't heard it since then.
That's got the curl code.
Look,
exactly.
Everything, man.
The only question is it beep 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 or is it rotary?
Look, I didn't want to cancel on Renee again. I was like, look, I'm gonna make it happen. So y'all just have to deal. Right?
We gonna take you however you come, and whatever sounds come in your background. We got it. We're good.
Look, man, I'm back in high school again. So people come in here yelling at me, telling me I gotta go eat, get off that computer. Y'all just gonna have to deal with that.
They're gonna say, hang up the phone. I need the internet.
Tell your friends you'll call them back.
Exactly. Tell your little friends. Stop playing with your little friends online.
Oh man. Woo, that was good. That was good, y'all. That was good. So
I know the remix is gonna roast me for the next month and a half about this. I know
oh, it's already beginning.
No, I'm not even looking at the chat.
Don't look at the chat. Leave the chat alone.
So first, why don't we start with explaining, and Kamawa, whoever wants to go first can go, like where you are as far as your organization, what your role is, and what you see kind of as like the goal for members of your organization. Like, why would they, like, what is the intention when you bring someone in? Like, what is the intention for the role that they're going to play within your org? So I'll let y'all decide. You can do the mental rock, paper, scissors.
I'll let Kamal go first, since Kamal has the actual community-based organization. And so
when we recruit people and bring them in, obviously the idea based on who we are as a formation. So obviously it first starts on what your formation is about, what's your tendencies, what's your politics, why'd you create your formation, what is its purpose? And so for us, our purpose is a mass-based formation. Which means that we allow people to come in who have different ideological tendencies, and sometimes no real ideological tendencies, as in they see themselves as a sort of depoliticized, but something may have happened that got them interested. So the first thing is to kind of do what you alluded to, is to show that there's enough infrastructure, that this is not just something we're throwing together like in our basement or in Hiram's family house, whatever. That this has some structure to it. It has some resources to it. It has some people to it. It has some programs. It has some strategies. So it is to induce people in some ways to say that this is a good place, that if you're trying to get politicized and want to do work in your community, that we are a place for that. And then we take the walk together, hopefully, that is leading towards a collective political identity. So even in a mass-based organization, it's usually infused by a certain type of politics. In our case, our politics are revolutionary nationalists at its core, which means we believe that Black folks have a right to self-determination and to struggle within institutions and organizations we create. And what by revolution, of course, is that we believe the systems of white supremacy and capitalism are the systems that oppress us. And the work that we do must combat or fight back against those systems in big ways and or small ways, right? But those are the things that we try to lead people towards in terms of them joining an organization like a community movement builders. And I'll wrap up with this, like, as you say, though, that because of, I think a lot of this has to do with either how we do organizing in the United States or the current setup and superstructure of the United States. It is not necessarily always proven to be an easy task, right? Not only have our movements been destroyed, not only have we actually attacked each other within our movements, but our movements have remained, relatively speaking, small in terms of actual or organization and movements. And I think that is something that has to do with us and our conditioning within the belly of the beast, let's say. And I do think that that's something that we always have to continue to confront, as we even try to build these type of radical structures.
Yeah. So my organization right now doesn't do on the ground campaign work, right? I come from those organizations, but the organization I am the director of right now is called the Community Resource Hub for Safety and Accountability. So it's a national organization, it's an intermediary national organization that provides research, trainings, and technical assistance to organizations across the country that are running abolition defund campaigns. What we do right now is we launched last year our George Jackson Organizing School. And what we saw coming out of the defund work that was happening through 2019, 2020, all of that stuff, is that the majority of the folks who are coming out of this moment in this last 10 to 12 years, what we refer to as kind of like Black Lives Matter movement, not the organization, but this moment that they've labeled that, is that folks don't know how to organize, and folks don't know how to win the policies that they're advocating for, right? What we ended up doing was over relying on mobilizations and direct actions, a lot of sloganeering, but we don't actually know how to move people, organize bases of people, build that power to actually win the demands that folks are saying. And when you don't know how to do that, and you kind of shift away from even having to do that, then the demands just become bigger and bigger and bigger, where they're like, there's just no possible way you're going to win that, right? By yourself, let alone in this country. And so through the George Jackson School, what we do is we train folks, ideally new organizers, folks who are in organizations running campaigns right now, in the basics 101s of community organizing, traditional community organizing. And what we understand to be organizing is the building of organizations of people with similar interests to build the power to basically alter relations of power and to win immediate needs, immediate campaigns, immediate victories. We borrow that definition from the School of Organizing Liberation out in Oakland. And for us, that's important. So we see organizing as the building of people power, what Huey referred to, right, as the ability to define phenomena and make it, right, act in the way that you desire. And so building organizations of directly impacted people who can build their power to win the changes that they want to see. Most often than not, in this current moment, this is done through the nonprofit structure for a number of different reasons. I spoke about that with Musa and Ricky on the Gatherings podcast. I spoke about it on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, so I don't have to dive too much into that. But the reason we name it after George is specifically because of this phenomenon, this moment that we're in, where it is nonprofit organizations that are leading most of our social justice struggles, who are leading a lot of the campaigns that are seeking to win immediate demands for our communities, but also long-term demands that have now taken on a political nature in terms of calling out capitalism, calling out all kinds of abolition, right? All kinds of different things, but are still doing that within a nonprofit structure that is not inherently political, or if it is rad lib at best, progressive at best, even if it adopts and appropriates, and I use my language intentionally, appropriates revolutionary language, imagery, history to do that. And so through the George Jackson School, what we are doing is we are merging the basics of community organizing, getting out and actually talking to your neighbor, and not just your neighbor, but organizing is talking to the people who don't already agree with you. Because what we've also done in this moment is only talk in echo chambers, only talk with folks who have the same language, who understand the same frameworks, who have the right, they know all the right words to say. This is about the patience that we have with each other to go out and talk to the folks who are on the fence, talk to the folks who don't already agree with us, and slowly bring them in and develop them, working with folks together. We take that organizing process, that organizing approach, and merge it with political education. And for us, political education is something that also gets confused with popular education and political education. It's not so much just shooting out historical facts. And in 68, the Panthers did this. And in 71, Asada did that. And, and spouting those facts. Political education is about teaching people how to think, how to analyze the system that we're living under, how to analyze the moments and the conjunctures that we're in that dictate everything that's happened in our lives, but can also provide us the opportunity to create strategy and a roadmap out of the situations that we're in. So it goes beyond just name dropping a bunch of quotes and name dropping a bunch of sisters and doing all that. This is, how do you understand the moment that you're living in? How do you analyze that? The political forces, the social forces, the economic forces, right? How do you understand why certain movements pop up, why they dip and then pop up again, to then create the right strategy and the most useful use of these tactics, which are mobilizations and direct actions, which is not organizing. They're components of organizing, but them unto themselves are not organizing, to then lead us to the road to victory. And so what my organization is doing now is taking on the task of trying to train up as many organizers around the country as possible to see themselves in that way and to understand they're organizing in a much deeper way. That ultimately, and I'll wrap up with this, ultimately will starts with them in their nonprofits, but gets them to understand that nonprofit is limited and there's only but so much we can do within that framework. And what needs to be built are separate institutions, separate organizations, revolutionary organizations that take on the task of winning the world that we want to live in and the one that we deserve.
So you both managed to, in explaining where you are, give everybody the reason that I needed you both on at the same time, right? Because what I find is that you're both very clear in this, right? And there are two very distinct strategies, in my opinion, when you're trying to fight this system that we're all kind of trapped in. And my conundrum has always been, and Jared's going to laugh because I say this all the time, right? Like, we're all fighting a problem that literally only exists so there's a problem to fight, right? Like, the system is structured and set up to give people something to fight about so that we don't fight the system. Like, it's like this problem that literally only exists so there is something to distract people. And the question about like power and how you get power, how you gain power when you're living within a system that literally survives in order for you not to have power, right? So there's this constant battle of like, how do you do this? Like, how do you actually find a way to break something that literally exists to not be broken? Like, it literally, like, every system that we live under is only in existence because it never wants people to have power. It never wants regular people to be able to strive and live for themselves and do what they want. Like, freedom is like this thing that everybody talks about. But what people think freedom is always within the constraints of what the system allows you to be free to do. Right? Like, there's such a bubble that we're all living under. And Hiram, I don't know if I ever said this to you. The first time I watched you on this show, you talked about trying to explain to somebody in Philly why abolition should be a path when they're living in a place where getting shot and carjacked and all those things are the reality. And it really struck something for me, right? Because that to me is the biggest issue that anybody who is trying to even fight this battle about policing in general, right? This idea that people think that police are there to prevent those things from happening. And they simply don't understand that that's not the job of the police, right? Like, that's not their goal. That's not what they're paid to do. They really could care less about community safety. They could care less about, your auntie getting jacked. Like, they don't, like, that is not their responsibility. But everybody believes that's their responsibility, which then leads to this constant, like, attachment to this idea that you have to have this person in a costume with a gun because the whole world's going to go crazy if you don't have this person with a costume and a gun standing around harassing people. But if you think about, if you take that description away from being a police, if anybody else showed up at your door wearing a costume and with a gun, you would not be happy, right? You'd be like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? So it's the idea of really breaking this notion that police are here to do something that is valid for the community. And that is a hard thing to break, because we've all been, you know, basically we've all grown up with this idea that police are the good guys, right? Like they're there to help, they're there to serve and protect. And all of that is just propaganda. It's just nonsense. So in looking at what you both do, and I've talked to Kamal so many times, like over the years, and Hiram, you and I just really started to talk a little bit more in recent times. But my big thing for me as a person who considers myself to be an organizer is trying to find the balance of where can I be the most useful within these spaces, right? And people, I think one of the big issues that people have is they want to be more than they actually are. So in trying to find your space as an organizer, you also have to have a very real conversation with yourself about what your capabilities are. What can you actually do? Like, are you better off sitting behind a computer and doing research and bringing information to people who can actually present that information, right? Or do you need to be in the streets, right? So there's just so many different steps to trying to move forward when you're trying to really determine, like, where am I going to be most useful in this attempt to fix something within my own community. So for people who are asking, and I say, sorry, that was very long-winded, but for people to like kind of figure out that next pass, what do you tell somebody that you're encountering who's trying to figure out, like, where do I go? Like, how do I figure out, like, what's the next, like, what's the first thing somebody should be talking to themselves about and talking to their community about as they're seeking a path for actually participating in this process of organizing and joining something? Like, what is there a first step that you think people should be considering?
Is that for Dr. Franklin or for me?
Dr. Franklin, Lord, both of you.
Why don't you start this time, Professor Hiram?
Where do folks start? I mean, you know, find an organization, right? Like, join something. It's going to be trial and error, right? Because our movements, because our organizations, because have been so repressed, so beat down, nothing is going to be perfect. If you're looking for the magic bullet, if you're looking for the perfect organization, you're going to be lost. That's number one, right? If you are going in it looking for the perfect situation, I have this particular set of skills. This is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly how I want to contribute. You're going to be lost, right? That gets determined by the people who you're accountable to. And that's the importance of organization. And that's the difference between organizing and activism. Many activists consider themselves organizers, and they're not organizers. Organizing is a science. It took me 20 years to get to this point, right? And so I protect that title fiercely, because you can't just hop up because you went to a couple mobilizations and now you do what I do.
But doctor and professor, we just throw around like rag dolls. But activists and organizer, we got to build 20 years towards. But everybody today is just throwing around. No, I'm just playing. Go
ahead. Dr. Ball, you better than all of us know that doctor label don't mean nothing. Once people start opening their mouths, half these mofos with doctors need to shut up. So I would say, so it's not, and really quick, what I want to do is say, it's not a matter of like one is better than the other, right? Because I think activism and activists has been given a bad label. And so folks want to identify as organizer. That confuses people, and it confuses people what organizing is and what that requires. And so really quickly, an activist is driven by individual principles, the personal principles that you have, political principles, values that you hold. You find an issue that is like meaningful to you, and I show up to rallies, I show up, maybe I'm going with my friends, I'm doing things, but I'm not accountable to a body of people. I'm not accountable to a base of people. So the decisions I make are the decisions that I make primarily, first and foremost, on my own. And then if they can help with what other folks are doing, cool. There's places for that. And there's utility for that in those moments. We all have been activists. We all are activists at times. An organizer is responsible for the building of people power, for the building of organizations, for the development of other leaders, right? The activist can be on the megaphone, can be leading chants, can be giving fiery speeches, can be writing wonderful tweets and doing all the, you know what I'm saying? If you got clout chasers like Kamal, you can be all up on the camera, on the TV, dancing in the videos, all up on, you know what I'm saying? For organizers, you're behind the scenes. If you are not responsible for the development of another person, you're not an organizer. You're first, right? And it goes back to that level of accountability. So to answer your question of, I have all these skills, where do I go? Find an organization that fits, right? That fits your values, seems cool. They seem like they got their stuff together. Join, and through that process of building with them, getting to know them, that will present itself what your role should look like, because that has to be done with the people. It can't be imposed on them, right? And that comes, a lot of it's a lot of, because of the mobilizations, and we have mostly mobilizations and not actual organizing campaigns that are called organizing, but it's not, it's mobilizations, then it seems a little easier. Mobilization is putting people out on the street. I put out a flyer, I put out a fire tweet, yo, meet us out here, boom, we're gonna march, and then next week we're gonna march again, and then next week we're gonna march again. We may stop and chant or whatever. Oftentimes, those mobilizations, as leaderless as they love to say, because that's the whole thing. We so horizontal, we so leaderless, and all that stuff. Someone is always going to fill that vacuum. Someone's always going to fill that void. There's always going to be some leaders. There's always going to be some folks who are leading that. And 9 out of 10 times for these mobilizations, there's always going to be some academic, some adjunct professor, some, somebody from intellectual or whatever, from that sort of like professional class, who is doing that because they don't want to humble their ego and actually join an organization and be a piece of a larger body. They want to do exactly what you were saying. I've got this skill set. I have this information. I have it. I'm the one who should do that. And they're not accountable to anybody. So I'll wrap up by saying, if you have skills that you want to bring to an organization, find that organization, talk with them, go through the process of becoming a member, be accountable to that organization and to the base of people who they are working with and representing, and let those people tell you where you best fit.
I think the only thing I'll add is, a good organization will find a slot for you to do work, right? A good organization will understand, as you alluded to, that everybody's busy within sort of the capitalist framework of jobs and family and kids or partying, whatever it is. A good organization will help develop you to begin to take your role within that organization more seriously. And at the same time, say, this is how you can help support this organization. We may not need you at the rally or the demo, or we may not need you to be conducting this class. But if you're active in that research, we're doing this research project, and we think this is where you could help us fit. And a good organization will not make you feel guilty for only playing that role, but will respect you and want you to continue to play that role. A bad organization gets into fights around who's the real this and who's the real that, and I do this and you do that, right? When those things start popping up, then that means there's issues with the political education and the foundation of how those organizations should exist or what people should be doing in terms of their work. Organizations understand that there are complete bodies, right? There's arms, legs, toes, heads, and all the rest of it that work together towards something, that people play different roles at different times. And sometimes there will be a need for a call out of everybody, no matter what you do, to participate in something, right? Sometimes there will be a need for people to step outside their comfort zone and to learn and to do more and to take on new skills. A good organization will help define and develop when those times are, and will start putting you in place to do that kind of work. Sometimes people, again, I don't want to do this young old thing, but we get people who pop up for like a month or 2 months or 3 months, and they think they should be like Hiram on the mic, or they think they should be on TV or doing something else, or whatever it is. Like they should be leaders, or they should be taking something over or doing something. We got to understand that without without trying to bring in ageism or whatever like that, it's about political development. It's about political ideology, and it's about understanding how organizations function and working within it. It's not necessarily always that you don't challenge organization dicta and things that people suggest that should be happening. Of course you do, but you also have to understand that organizations, one reason why our organizations are radical organizations, in addition to being destroyed, fall flat a lot of times, is because we wind up competing with each other in organizational spaces as opposed to complementing each other in organizational spaces. And until we get that right, whether mass base or party or cadre, whatever inflection, whether it has a cover of a nonprofit or considers itself a street organization, until we begin, and in fact, we can probably learn a lot from street organizations in terms of how to mobilize and organize. We can learn a lot from churches and mosques on how to organize and mobilize, because those of us who consider ourselves who have radical politics don't always sometimes get the basics of why people join organizations, and or how do you bring people through organizations so that they can play important roles, and those organizations can have a grounding, and those organizations can be around for the long fight, and not just for quick mobilizations, or not just flash in the pans, or not just stay at your 6 friends in your living room talking revolution, but ain't going nowhere with it, right? So things that we got to think about when we actually join, and when we pick our organizations that we want to be a part of.
And that is the beauty of being an organizer. And I've been doing organizing for 20 years, and it's hard work, right? Organizing is not easy, folks. You don't get paid a lot, and it's hard work, and it's long work. But man, like, you have to love it. And I say it all the time, you have to be built for it, right? Like, I can train you, doesn't mean you can do it. And there's nothing wrong with not being able to do it. There's nothing wrong with organizing not being your jam, and the classroom is your jam, or research is your jam. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But organizing is, you have to love the leadership development, right? Watching the light bulbs go off for people who have been told their whole lives that they don't know nothing, that they can't do anything, been disempowered, they have been beat down, and taken through that process of navigating things that they were told you'll never understand. This is too difficult. You need all kinds of PhDs to understand. You need to read 1,000 books. Nah, man, I'm gonna make it plain, like Malcolm taught us. I'm gonna make it plain, and we're gonna get there together, right? In this Freudian way. I'm gonna learn from you. You're gonna learn from me, and together we're gonna do this. And watching those light bulbs go off is amazing. You have to love the fight, because you're in a constant fight. Organizers are constantly thinking, how am I gonna win this campaign? Because you got to win. It's not about just making demands that you don't plan on winning, right? It's like, how do I actually win that? Who's the target? How am I get over on them? Because they're trying to beat us, and we got to beat them. You have to love the fight and just live in that, right? Like, obsess about winning this campaign, obsess about winning the thing that it is that you're going to do. Because other real organizers, in an old school way, maybe the younger ones don't, but my age and definitely, Kamal's senior status, they're going to ask you, and they used to ask us all the time. They were like, well, what have you won? What have you won? You call yourself an organizer. What have you won? And if you don't have anything that you won, then they can be like, well, what's the organizer? What are you doing? Right? Because there's no time to play games out here. My first organizing training wasn't even a training itself. There was an Irishman named Pat Spear here in Connecticut. He was organizing churches. I was working for another organization. He saw me in the neighborhood. He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm the organizer. He's like, you're an organizer? I was like 20-something years old. You know what I'm saying? It's my first organizing job. I'm like, yeah, I'm an organizer. He's like, cool. He's talking to me. He's like, recognize that I needed some development. And he's like, look, I'll develop you, but I got to see something first. I got to see if it's even worth my while doing this. And I'm like, wow, this man's real arrogant, white man. That's crazy, right? But he was like, this isn't a game. So he's like, all right, I need you to do 25 one-on-ones a week. 25 one-on-ones a week. I was like, what? Talk to 25 people who I don't know, get to know them, every week. I'm just like, where do I go? He says, look out the window. I look. So what do you see out there? I'm like, houses. He's like, pick one and start there. And that was it. And he's telling me, don't come back. He said, if you don't get 25, don't come back into my office and don't talk to me ever again. I was like, oh, snap. And that's just how it was done. And you either sink or you swim. And if you sink, it's all good. There's other roles for you. If you swim, be prepared to start swimming and keep swimming, because these waves and these currents are going to get bigger and bigger. The one thing I want to say is, back to your first question, because I think it's an important one. Where do I go? Where do I start? Is you also have to understand the difference between nonprofit organizations and political organizations, ideally revolutionary organizations. Kamal also mentioned churches. There's different types of organizing. So organizing itself isn't inherently revolutionary. It isn't inherently radical. The Tea Party back in the day used Saul Alinsky, who's credited as the godfather of community organizing, his rules for radicals, right, to win all kinds of offices and reshape the way legislation is done at the federal level. It's a science that anyone can use for good or bad. And so with nonprofit organizations, they tend to play a bunch of different roles that they call organizing. Service providing is not organizing. Service providing is service providing. Does it have a place in organizing work? It absolutely does. Advocacy, speaking on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves. Is that organizing? That's not organizing. Does it have a role and a place? It absolutely has a role and a place. Activism, that we said, is that organizing? It's not organizing. Does it have a place? It absolutely has a place. All forms of struggle are valid. They're just all different with their very specificities, and we have to understand that. So when we're talking about the organizations that you join, you need to understand the difference between a nonprofit organization and understand the limitations of that organization. They can do wonderful things. They can do amazing work, and they do a lot of good work out here for the most part, but they have their limitations. And one of the key limitations is that they stick to bread and butter issues and they stay away from ideology. That's that neo-Alinsky model of doing it. Saul Alinsky, who is credited for being the godfather of community organizing, said that you speak to people's self-interests. That organizing is about relationship building, right? Deep relationships rooted in folks' self-interest. That the organizer is the central figure in this whole narrative to build these organizations, but stick to bread and butter issues and stay away from ideology. Saul Alinsky was a staunch anti-communist. Neo-Alinsky then took that, and then you had the Acorns and those types of organizations that popped up in the 80s and the 70s when the radical and the revolutionary organizations got destroyed, and this pop-up of all these nonprofit organizations, you had this Neo-Alinsky model that popped up with the Acorns and sort of like branched out, right? And those are the nonprofits we tend to like know today. Then you have revolutionary organizations. They're not beholden to philanthropic dollars, that have a much stricter membership process. Nonprofits, anyone can jump in and jump out. Revolutionary organizations we're talking about are the ones that have an ideology. 9 out of 10 times it's Marxist, it's socialist. Anarchism falls under the communist flag, but their associations are different, right? They don't, for the most part, don't form full-on organizations and that sort of thing. And so that's a different thing. We'll put that to the side. So we're talking about ideally Marxist organizations, CPUSA, Party for Social Liberation. DSA is something different, sort of like in the middle. It's no shade. It's just it's because of the way they operate. It's something like in the middle. But these are organizations that don't rely on foundation dollars. They have a clear political ideology. Their membership process is much different and much stricter. And so for you as the individual, you have to decide, which one am I going in? One can give you a job. One is going to deal with single issues. If your jam is restorative justice, if your jam is reproductive rights, if your jam is housing or whatever. The other one is going to be a different level of accountability, a different level of structure and decision making, and its role and purpose in its organizing and its campaigns are for something much different, which is ultimately systemic change, the overthrow of the system itself, and is not as deeply embedded in single issue campaigns like these other ones.
Really quick, I wanted to add on. So the thing that something that Hiram said brought to mind, like that so-called radical or revolutionary Black organizations, and probably others too, but the ones I know best, get stuck on is that they think event planning is organizing. They think that and again, it's not that event planning doesn't play a role, or it's not like you can't organize at an event planning event with people who come, but people get so enamored with doing event after event after event that becomes for them the process in which they see themselves doing organizing work. But instead of going in the community or being locked in a community, understanding the parameters or the territorial places that you want to hit in, where you want to go to, where you want to meet people, where you want to change conditions on the ground, where you want to have your event in terms of a town hall to organize more people because you've knocked on those doors to get them to come. We sort of flip it and then we just ask the people to come to us, right? And so again, it's not so much I don't think that you do some organizing at event planning, but that's hit and miss, right? That's something in which you're doing. You're hoping that some good people turn out who already have some politics, and that those will be the sort of cream of the folks that you kind of get, and then you feel good about yourself. But you haven't necessarily done the deep dive organizing that Hiram spoke about, and you haven't made the connections in neighborhood. You haven't made the connections with the neighbors. You haven't done things that draw them out of their homes at some point to say that they want to get involved in making some larger change, some larger purpose that they now want to adopt in their lives. You're basically taking, and again, I'm not even saying that it's overtly bad. I think that there's a layer of organizing, particularly in the United States, which does involve the sort of college educated or well-read organizer or wannabe organizer as a certain layer of people who begin to do that work, right? Whether we like it or not, that's kind of what has happened here within the last 30 or 40 years. So some of those folks serve a purpose. But we can't be confused by some of the tactics and strategies that we use, as Hiram was pointing out, to think that that means that we're actually organizing in neighborhoods. And one of the best places, again, something that you alluded to, but in labor organizing, they still give some of the best training in this day and age. Obviously they're usually jobs or whatever, but a lot of labor organizing will just put you someplace and tell you to do exactly what Hiram was speaking about. We don't necessarily do that in terms of Black radical politics, whether it's because of the lack of resources, whether it's the lack of proper political education on how to organize. But we've not been good over the last, again, 20, 30 years of deep diving in community and being where the people are, right? Even though we have our lessons, we have the Panthers that we hold up so much, but we don't do what the Panthers did. We have SNCC that we know about, but we don't do what SNCC did. So we have to understand that, when we see those videotapes or those retrospective films, that you're getting a surface level look at some of these organizations. The Panthers had offices in the neighborhood. SNCC literally moved to communities in different numbers and stayed in those communities, stayed with families and friends, set up freedom schools, because what they were doing was setting a stage where they were organizing with people where they lived as a form of community organizing, grassroots organizing. So I think that's something that's just really important in terms of those distinctions between the activities that we do around our organizing and what actual organizing is.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, I was going to say, right, if we're going to name it, the organizing changed because of the money that came in the nonprofits. So when you get a job, when you get a career from this, that changes a lot of things. When you don't have to live in the neighborhood that you're organizing anymore to say that you're organizing, that changed a lot of things. In this last 12 years, the level of celebrity that folks have been able to attain by saying I'm an organizer or I'm out here, I'm in this for 3 years and I'm already writing books on this joint, right? Like, that changed a lot of things. When social media comes up and it's like, all you gotta do is fire these fire ass tweets and get real spicy on Twitter, right? You can't tell me nothing. I'm I learned something in class with Dr. Ball yesterday, right? And today I got a whole Twitter thread on what it was that we just spoke about in class, because which is cool. And a lot of us was like learning some stuff like that, but that's not it. That's not it. And folks became real famous. All that came with their syllabi, with their book deals, with their little Twitter thread, with all kinds of stuff. But you ain't talking to people in the neighborhood. Because then the other thing, the other spicy thing, right? So we can get real spicy, ends up being the class character and the class that a lot of these folks are coming from. So you got a lot of Black people who are waging Black liberation struggles who don't like poor Black people. I don't care how many marginalized identities you got. You don't like poor Black people. And you don't feel comfortable with them. Right? There was a long time period where it's like Nuck If You Buck was like the anthem. You like Nuck If You Buck, but you don't like Nuck If You Buck niggas. Mm. Excuse my word, Diallo. Excuse it, right? For us non-real Blacks. And so that is really, really important. That's really important to understand how this stuff changed, why it's changed, and why it's the way it is, because there's a material benefit to doing that. Where in other countries, you don't get paid to do this. It's literally life or death. And so the level of relationship building that has to happen, and for our people, SNCC, the SCLC, the Panthers, back in those days when the times were like real spicy, that level of relationship building was deeply important, not only to helping the community recognize their power to be able to change things, but also to protect yourself when the state punches back. Right. So and we've lost that because I'm sorry, and I'll end here, Dr. Paul. We've lost that because we've gotten to this place where you have to have the perfect language. You have to have read the right books. You have to quote the right quotes. And if you don't say that, then I'm done with you. I don't want to talk to you. I only want to talk to people who are on this wave. And I don't want to have to struggle with everyday people and their underdevelopment, which we all have gone levels of underdevelopment that we've had to undo, and socializations. Right, and struggle with them every day until they get it. And you have to believe that they will get it. And most of us who are out here talking about Black liberation don't truly believe that they can get it. You talk that talk, but you're not walking that walk. I don't want to hear about what you think in your brain. What have you done? Who are you developing? Where are the fruits, right? To my 5% days, right? Where are the fruits off that tree? Where them seeds, God? Where the fruits off that tree? I don't see it, Lord. You talking, but I don't see it. Show and prove.
You know what? I can't talk to Dr. No more. But go ahead, Jared, you can wait to say something.
Well, no, I do want to come back to what Kamal said about the ageism. I do have a question about that, but since Hiram mentioned Diallo and Chidi Macha brought up our great revolutionary organizational leader of a generation, I did want to ask, who just became a Muslim.
That brother just joined the Ummah. Yeah, he just joined the Ummah.
Did want to ask, we from time to time this issue of religion comes up on this platform and elsewhere. How do you all engage the issue, or maybe that's a poor framing of it, but how does religion factor into the work that you do, and how do your particular views of religion factor into the work that you do, or how should organizers approach?
Kamal, you want to go, or do you want?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I mean, I'll say a couple of things on religion. One, I do believe, even I'm an atheist, so plain and simple or whatever. To me, that doesn't mean people who are religious aren't great organizers. Some of the greatest organizations that we've ever had are religious based. It doesn't mean that they can't be radical or they can't be politicized. I think that the context of what's happening around the world, the context of the Middle East and the organizations that are liberation organizations are deeply religious Muslim organizations. And there's no taking away that they are more militant, more organized, more radical than most of the things we've created here in the United States over the last 20 to 30 years. So even when we look back at the history, something that Hiram alluded to, the Montgomery bus boycott, right? Those were church folks. Those were everyday common Black folks who went to church, who created a network to, again, where they could boycott a whole bus system, not for a day, not for a week, not for a couple of weeks, for over a year, right? That's a level of organizing that we have not seen. When people be calling out, oh, let's do a boycott, I'm like, really? Because it's like part of your rhetorical device to say we want boycott. Is like, what groundwork have you even laid for those words, for that word to come out your mouth? Just because you put a poster up or you do a social media thing and you tell people to, don't mean they're going to do it, because you don't have no relationship with those people to make them stop working or stop doing something on a day-to-day basis. You haven't put together any structures for them to do something instead of doing what you want them, what they've been used to doing. You don't have any way in which you rally them, which you take care of them, which you protect them. When none of those things exist, but you've already called for the boycott, you've already lost, right? Because then you're just relying on rhetoric. So the fact that churches and mosques and other spiritual beliefs can play a role in organizing, I have no doubt. Because again, when I look at the person who's influenced me the most, Malcolm, even though he said things like keep your religion in the closet if it hasn't done such and such, he was a deeply spiritual human being. And I'm sure that added to his ability to do all the work that he did, right? So I work, in terms of my own organizing, I work with brothers and sisters in the Islamic community. I work with brothers and sisters in the Christian community, because my role is not to take away their religion, right? That's not my goal. My goal is to fight the system. My goal is to fight against capitalism and white supremacy and to bring self-determination. And anything that we have will be diverse anyway. We're going to win. And then even afterwards, right? But people think of like, an organization is different than a larger society. The first time I went to Cuba, like 95, 96, silly me, I expected everybody to be in green fatigues, walking around, saluting, the flag or whatever like that. It's everyday people who are supporting the revolution with different politics, African-based religions, Catholics, non-religious folks who supported the revolution in their way and expressed themselves in their day-to-day lives differently because that's what mattered to them. So I'm not here to beat out people's religion, even if I don't agree with it. Only if I think it interferes or stops the ability to have a true radical roadmap for organizing. Then if you use your religion in that way or you use it to oppress, of course, that's when you challenge it. But if your religion, I had to learn that the hard way too. My first girlfriend she was saved and I was an atheist. And so I had to learn that the hard way too. You don't take away what drives people unless you think it is stopping you or them from getting the work done. Then of course there's a challenge, right? But your role is not to, in my opinion, to stop people or to deny people's spirituality or religious practices, particularly when a lot of times those folks are more organized than you are in the very community that you claim that you want to be fighting for. And instead of fighting against the system, you fighting against them, right? That's where you spend your time because you're so righteous and right. You're fighting against the people who have the religious practices that are different than you, trying to call them out. How did that go left, right? Instead of organizing those people, now you're mad at those people. Instead of organizing those people, now you're calling those people names. So you're not organizing that. You're distracting yourself and distracting your movement. So people have to understand when it's time to call something out because it is stopping movement from happening, it's stopping radical politics from taking place, then of course there's a time for that. But your primary role is not to change people's religious and practices, again, unless it interferes with the organizing work that is projected on the ground.
My dear brother Kamal, bringing Bootsy Collins and James Brown into this conversation. I think, religion and religious institutions, that can go either way, right? Do they play a role in organizing? They do. Again, organizing is not inherently left or right. It's not inherently progressive or whatever. I think Kamal laid it out perfectly. The only thing that I would say is these religious institutions, again, what they provide folks is a sense of hope, some sort of vision for the future. Now, maybe the afterlife, maybe whatever, but it's a place of hope. And people need to feel hope. If you want folks to get out in the streets and to do what they've never imagined they would ever do in their lives, they need that hope. It provides organization, it provides structure, it provides community. I'm a non-believer, but I can see that, recognize that, and respect that it provides community. Again, organizing is about those deep relationships. It's about that trust. It's about walking with people. It's about transformation. And these religious institutions, a lot of times, are able to provide that for a lot of people. Doesn't mean that all of them are going to be on the same pot. Some of them are still held in reactionary thought, very conservative positions that have to be struggled through. And other ones are much more open and willing to do that. And so it's not a easy one size fits all, but they definitely do have to be respected. And you definitely do have to respect folks' faith, because it does provide them something in their lives, and especially in a system that is taking everything away from them. And so you never want to rob the people of that as we're moving along. And that's the hard part, but also the beautiful part about organizing, right? Is meeting people where they're at and struggling with them, and let them teach you, and you teach, and you teach them. And that mutual respect. And there's a quote from a labor organizer, Jose La Luz, that says, organizer, the role of the organizer is to create space for everyday people to take courageous action. That is your job. You are creating the space for everyday people to take courageous action. For some folks, it may be going to a march. They've never gone to a march before and they're scared. For some people, it may be a direct action. For some people, it may be challenging their understanding of their faith. And there's debate for Christians between the historical Jesus, the political Jesus, and what is sold mostly right through fundamentalism and stuff like that. For other folks, it's Islam. But we have seen across the globe that religion, and specifically religious institutions, can be mobilized for one way or the other. They can be weaponized, they can be mobilized one way or the other, because of the profound impact and the role that they play in so many people's lives, for providing community, providing a sense of hope, providing a sense of structure and clarity that so many folks desperately are looking for.
So I'm trying to think, when is the last time I've been in a space where I was the only person who believed. And I'm not a religious person, so to speak, right? Like, I don't go to church. I consider myself spiritual because I think there's something greater. I don't like to try and define it. So part of the reason this conversation is thrilling for me is because I always like listening to people who say they're atheists, non-believers, however, but it always feels like you also know that there's something in you that is guiding you to be a person who wants better things for people, right? Who wants, and people can say it's biological, whatever, like however you want to define it. But I'm glad you asked the question, Jared, because this is what frustrates me about Diallo. God bless his spirit, right? And I say that on purpose just to piss him off. So the reality is, like, there's a tact that you can take in speaking with people about things that you disagree with inherently that doesn't have to be disrespectful, right? Like, you don't have to tell somebody they're stupid and, you know, they're, what is the word he always uses? Like, not crazy, but like, you know, it's just their imagination. Like this whole idea that because Diallo hasn't seen it and hasn't experienced it, therefore it doesn't exist. And he does not understand how immensely like egocentric that is, to believe that just because he's never had that experience, that means it's not a thing, right? And all the time, like when people ask him things, his answer is like, well, I've never seen that. I've never experienced that. And I'm like, okay, so that means it didn't happen? Like, you know, like there's so many things you cannot experience in the world as a singular person. That doesn't dismiss that thing for the entire world just because you haven't experienced it. So I wanted to say that out loud, just because I don't often talk about like being a person who is, in my own determination of just having a word for it, spiritual versus being religious, which, you know, I've been told it's just lazy. What is it? Like spirituality is religion, lazy people religion. Is that what the definition was the other day? But I just wanted to thank you all for sharing that. And you know, that was,
well, let me, I want to defend Diallo a little bit, because I don't want to, don't give me that look. What's that look? What's that look for? What's that look for?
I'm gonna wait till you say what you say.
Only in the sense of what you said. Like, I don't think Diallo's stance is because he doesn't see it, it doesn't have. I think he has a worldview, a political worldview, which is that religions are falsely leading our people away from political organizing and distracting them.
And
now,
that is,
a large part of
hold on, real quick.
What I think I was doing. Oh, wait a minute. We're gonna have our first fight. We're gonna have our first fight.
I'm just gonna correct you real quick.
What you gonna say?
That is correct. But I have literally heard him say, "I've never seen that."
Yeah. But you got to tease out the language. You got to tease out what he's getting at when he's saying that, right? So yes, of course he's saying that as a quip. He's like Hiram. He's full of quips, right? So he's going to say that as a little dig, of course. But I think his larger point, of course, is for him. And again, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I probably disagree with his presentation of it a lot of times. But I think also it sounds like in his private off-screen life that he has a lot of interactions and relationships with people who are everything from spiritual to religion, and can have certain conversations with those folks in community. So I don't want to set this up as a one stance versus a Diallo stance, whatever. I think he has truly deep, well-studied beliefs as to why he does not accept the idea of spiritual or religious teachings or religion as something that should guide us as human beings. And I, for the most part, probably accept those. I just don't accept, probably maybe similar to other folks, I think some of the ways in which he expresses it, I don't see that as necessarily, at least the on-air Diallo, right? I don't always see that as necessarily furthering the ability to organize with people who think differently than you, because that is who you organize with, right? You organize people, or you try to organize people who are not yet there, and you are joined by fellow organizers who maybe some surpass you and some may at your level, some may be beneath you, whatever, it's a great way to say it. But you're organizing people who otherwise would not be organizing it. So they may have practical knowledge of why they are oppressed. They sometimes may have better knowledge than you. You know what I mean? When you talk to cats on the block with all that, people know what capitalism is, even if they don't use the term that you use. They know how the economy works. They know what happens in the jail system, in the prison system. They know the role of the police. The question becomes, do they feel like they can do something about it, right? Or do they just ignore it or accept it as a commonplace of life in society, that's just part of their everyday life, and they just got to roll with that? The organizer has to get to those folks, whether they are spiritual or not spiritual, religious or not religious. What is it that is stopping them from doing that? The organizer has to find out and try to get them to the place of defending their community, of organizing for their community and for themselves. That is the role of the organizer. And it doesn't matter whether or not, and again, you may go into spaces where, you know, after you've tried and you failed, then you go like, hey, that's just not going to work. Whatever the spiritual community is, whatever this other community is, whoever they are, it's just that, you know, I've tried, we're just failing right now. There's got to be some other folks that we can organize. But you don't know until you try, right? You don't know until you jump in there and see who is movable and who is not, who effectively is going to be somebody that may be all the way to the right, who's going to be quasi-supportive, maybe on some things. So you want to keep them, even if you disagree with them, you don't want to make an enemy out of them, right? You as an organizer have to, like, as Hiram was saying, the science of it is you have to understand that and figure that out, right? Everything is not like a lead with your hardcore rhetoric and let the chips fall where they may. You have to figure out, how do you bring people along? Who goes this far? Who's in this camp? It's the process of organizing. And you don't know that until you get into the community and try.
And it's the importance of actual political education. right? Not spouting off quotes and historical facts, but teaching people how to think, how to analyze, in whose interests are we being governed, in whose interests are decisions being made. How is society, how are institutions being organized to uphold and maintain those interests? And that's the easy way. Even if you're talking about religion, you're talking about a school, you're talking about an organization, look at what they're talking about, look at what they're saying. And then through that analysis, right, in whose interest is this being done? Is this being said? Ultimately, in whose interest will this play out? And once you go through that analysis and you're able to do all that, you can identify who your actual enemies are, identify who your actual targets are, and then move from that place. And you see that historically, right? So with the Cuban Revolution, right? And they came out as Marxists, and they were all hardcore atheists, and they were like, man, to hell with religion and all that. And Fidel had to change because most of Cuba was religious, be it right Ocha or be it Christianity, Catholic, because Latin America is heavy Catholic, right? And had to engage in conversations with the religious leaders in Cuba at that time who hung around, who were still there, part of the revolution, right? The founders of the Martin Luther King Center in Havana, those who have visited, who have had the opportunity to visit the Martin Luther King Center in Havana, right? Are those folks who said, we are down for the revolution, we are down for this, and we're also not going to abandon our faith, which for them was Christianity. And Fidel had to learn and recognize that there was a utility, that you can't just strip the people of that and take that away from that. That means so much to them. Through political education, you can correct reactionary thinking, but that doesn't have to be done by bashing someone's faith, right? Or completely obliterating it, even if you yourself don't believe in it. Because ultimately, what is the main goal? The main goal here is the struggle that we're trying to win. And right now, me convincing you that your God doesn't exist or that waters weren't parted doesn't really matter when we're facing this bigger struggle, right?
It means everything, Hiram.
And those people are organizers, and that's fine.
No, but
right.
Yeah,
but then those folks aren't organizers. Those folks, those folks play. So if you're going to hold on to that position, and ultimately you're not going to allow your heart to speak to somebody else's heart, that's the only way you're going to be able to struggle through these tough conversations, right? Is believing in the hope that me and you together can get there, and also you acknowledging I can't get there without you. I can't, and there's not enough of us who believe just like me that can get there without the rest of y'all. And so if I'm gonna dig my heels in the sand as a non-believer, then I'm making a conscious choice that my role in this is not to organize and is not to help. It's something else, and that's totally fine. But if you are an organizer, that's not the way to go. And Fidel himself learned that, and Fidel himself wrote a book on that, as did Marx, as did so many other revolutionary heroes who understood that, who weren't believers themselves, but who understood. Cabral says that, right? As well. You don't have to believe, but you struggle with the folks, but you don't jump in trying to rip that out because it's going to blow up in your face.
So,
and
Ray,
I'm
not sure.
Some questions from the audience too. I just want to throw that out there. Bring them in the conversation.
We have a couple. I think we have at least one. But so I know, just quickly, because I know some time was spent on with Diallo, but I just want to make clear, like, I agree with what both of you said, but I also want to just also acknowledge that personally, I think my views of religion are actually more hostile than Diallo's. But to your point, I think it is important that we find ways to engage with folks if the goal is to organize and build. But the real reason I brought that up is because I wanted to make more. Diallo's one thing. What I actually wanted to make more fun of was the Sean King thing, which to me is actually worse. To the extent that it feels like it is a grift to take advantage of not only the moment in Palestine, but to reascribe celebrity, to grab some headlines, and to give some to ensconce someone in I think it feels, I really don't know, but it feels inauthentic and as I said, grifty. So, but I did want to ask the both of you, because one of the things, not specifically about Shaun King, all jokes aside, but the one thing that has come up on this platform a number of times is pop cultural references to activism, organization, event planning, all the varieties you've talked about. And I am wondering how you all both relate to this, and do you all take a stance on this question that has been debated at times of is there value to the work that you all do when we see, even for instance, a Shaun King kind of celebrity, kind of whatever, or whether it's Judas and the Black Messiah, or whether it's Spike Lee's Malcolm X, whether it's Panther from back in the day, or some other film, or some or the more Shaun King styled celebrity, whatever, social media superstar. Do you find that there's any value to the work that you do, as some have argued, that it at least brings people's awareness to certain issues, or it may inform or alert someone to a particular person or moment in history? Do you find that these, again, what I'm just broadly calling pop references, do you find them an aid to the work that you all do?
Real quick before, because people are
sure.
wilding in the chat a little bit. I love y'all. Yeah, just real quick. And there's nothing I've said today that I've never said to him directly, so I feel I feel nothing about that. And that said, I just wanted to be clear, like the point in the conversation is to discuss how do you utilize what you know with people that you don't necessarily agree with, right? So how do you engage in that conversation with a person if you are really on opposite ends of the spectrum? And this is actually an argument me and my husband have all the time. Like, if somebody truly disagrees with you, right? How do you engage in a conversation with that person without completely throwing them off kilter and not even being it? Because then how do you move forward? Like, how do you get that person to help you with this thing that you're fighting towards if they don't even want to have a conversation with you because they feel like you're so disrespectful about something that's important to them that they don't want to engage with you in any way, shape, or form? So that was really the point of that.
You move on. That's important. You move on, right? There's also an assessment that you make that this isn't going anywhere, and I got to move on because there's too many other people I got to talk to, right? And so if there's a person who it's just not going to happen, that's wonderful. That is totally okay. And you know what I'm saying? I'll see you when I see you, and you move on.
But as the organizer, right? If it's the way you are engaging with that person that is causing it then to be about the argument you're having versus the thing that you're trying to engage with them on, how do you navigate that if you don't find a way to adjust the way you're engaging with that person? Because you may actually be in agreement, right? But if your argument is about whether you believe or not versus about whether the system or the policy that you're living under is good, and the argument is that way because of how you approach that person, then who is it that needs to make the adjustment?
I mean, I'll say quickly, I mean, again, human beings, we're going to have a range of conversations, even as organizers, right? But if you are organizing, then again, your role is, and people again don't always pick up on this, your job is not to win every argument. It's not to engage in every argument. It's not to show that you're right about everything. It's not to do, as Hiram has talked about, be able to quote famous revolutionaries in front of everyday people, right? There may be times and places where those things are the things you do. There may be times and places where you need to win an argument to show other folks or to present your side. There may be times where a rhetorical flourish wins you people over who would not necessarily like mess with you or want to hear what you have to say. But if you're an organizer and if you're taking a scientific approach to your work, then you have to understand the whens and the wheres and the whys and the hows, right? So me getting into an argument with a neighborhood preacher about Christianity when I want to use his space or I want to talk to his congregation, it's not the time, it's not the place, I'm not there for that. And if I fall into that because I think I'm so superior, because I think your God is fake, then I'm not organizing, right? I'm just arguing or debating with people, right? And that may help me or satisfy me intellectually. And we've all been there, right? But it don't mean that I'm moving, if I'm an organizer, that I'm moving forward with the work at hand. In fact, I may be slowing that work down. I may be stopping that work because now I've shown myself not to be an organizer or a good organizer, but to be a terrible organizer. I've turned people against me needlessly so, right? And again, even in community movement builders, right? We've had the experiences where people who are on the fence or people who do not share our politics are in favor of Cop City, but we don't necessarily need to isolate them to the point where they become now open enemies, right? So we have to understand that organizing is not about, you feeling good about yourself because you made a terrific point, right? Organizing is about winning people over to get the work done in the community that gets people in mass to decide that they're going to challenge structures, they're going to challenge how they're governed, they're going to challenge the institutions that oppress them. And so we have to just understand that. To Jared's question, I go back and forth, to be honest. I mean, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I'm like, it's all trash. I don't want no part of it. It's stopping organizing from happening. But again, in my clout chasing ways, I've been on Roland Martin, right? Because I was like, look, B, this dude has got a 1 million person audience or whatever it is. Someone has invited me on. We're in the midst of this battle. I need to reach as many people as possible. I think I even was somebody who knew Sean King. Like he did an IG live and I was just standing there and they were like, come on, talk to Sean King. I was like, oh shit. But I did it because at the time, sorry, I know I owe you some money. I'm just cursing in front of my son. But I did it because at the time it felt like, we're all at City Hall. This dude has got a live stream going. He's got 2,000 people listening to his live stream, right? And some of those are everyday Black people, right? And so I go back and forth because there are times when I'm like, that's complete. Like if someone asks me just to go on a show and I'm in a certain frame of mind and I think of them a certain way, it's like, I don't know what's the point of that. I'm not sure what I'm adding to struggle. I'm not sure who I'm going to win over. So I definitely don't have a sound answer. I know I do publicly talk about these people. So I do, so I am somebody who is like, there's a difference between seeking fame and seeking to organize. When people are seeking fame and seeking to promote themselves, they usually don't have an organization behind them, or that organization is only for the purpose of standing them up. It's not for the purpose of moving people in the community. And so you got in New York, there were times we had to mess with Al Sharpton, right? There were just we Richie Perez of Young Lords, later started several other organizations. He actually did meetings, public meetings, because he was like, look, we need to reach the people who come see Al Sharpton, right? It's not about Al Sharpton at that point. He's like this. These are like older Black women that we need to reach for this campaign. These are fathers. These are other people who, for whatever reason, they've drifted towards a grifter, right? And do we ignore those folks? Do we just act like if they do something with Al Sharpton, they're no longer legitimately people in the community? Like Richie Perez had folks come out and speak on panels or whatever. So there, again, part of this is strategy and part of this are tactics. It's like, what if you're trying to succeed in something and someone has an audience? Is there a way in which you try to access that audience? I think there are some times where the answer is yes, and I think there's sometimes where the answer is hell no. So I don't have a firm principled stance on it, except to say that I try not to. What you won't see me do is invite those people on Black Power Media, right? What you won't see me do is invite those people to come speak at my organization's either political educations or town halls, or invite them to come organize with us or check us out. I will probably try to use their platform, but I will not give them whatever little platform that I may have access to, because then I am doing a disservice to the people that I am organizing with by bringing in politics that I consider to be backwards, right? So I think that's one clear way in which I will try to make a distinction. I don't care how well known you are. I don't care what you think you have done. If your line seems backwards, it seems to be something that will lead people astray, you won't get no invite to come speak at things that I may do. But if you give me an invite, I might take it, you know.
Yeah, those are tactical decisions based off your strategy, based off your campaign. What Kamal was saying, right? The practice that Richie was doing, and what that is to be that clean glass of water. And so, one of my favorite scenes in one of Dr. Ball's favorite movies, Spike Lee's Malcolm X, is when Malcolm goes up to see Elijah, and they have the glass of water, right? And Elijah puts the ink in the water and says, "The people are so thirsty, they'll drink anything." And he asked Malcolm to pour the clean glass of water, right? He said, but what if you gave them an option? They'll always choose that clean glass of water. Be the clean glass of water. And so there are times where you have to show and prove and show up in these spaces to allow the people to see that there is a clean glass of water. If you don't like what people are doing, stop crying, stop complaining, out organize them. That was my number one thing when BLM, the organization, first started, and everybody was on that. Oh man, they trying to make us all gay, and they and yada yada yada, and all the crazy stuff that was coming out. I'm like, look, you don't have to agree with it. You don't like it, out organize them. That's the game. That's the game you gotta love. You don't like what people are doing, out organize them. You don't like what BAP is doing, out organize them. You don't like what PSL or whoever's doing, out organize them. Simple. And let the people decide. Put your project out there and let the people decide. The people, right? They know a lot more than they're giving credit for. That's how you do that. And so you utilize these spaces at times to do exactly that. But again, it's got to be tactful. Is it all of them? No. So do I find all of them useful? No. But as organizers, we also deal with the world that we live in, not as as the world is, not as the world that we hope it to be. And too many people live in that prefigurative world of like, I'm going to live and imagine the world that we can have and live like that to bring it about. That's idealism. That's something else, right? Let's deal with the world that we are in today and work in that, but tactfully. Is it all those spaces? No, it's not all those spaces. Would I be there with Al Sharpton? I don't know. Probably not. Right? But I wasn't in that situation based off what the campaign needed, who you're trying to meet. All that has to be factored in before you can just be like yes or no. Right? That's the only thing that I would add to what Kamal was saying. But it goes back to back to strategy. And there's a difference between organizing and activism. Activism is I'm moved by this issue, I'm moved by this passion, I'm out here. Organizers move from a place of strategy and what is tactful, right? And what is building up on the strategy. And sometimes it is making these decisions. If these spaces, these little book clubs and all these other little things that these celebrities and folks are doing, and if that's the way that you're introduced to specific literature and specific concepts or whatever, then that's wonderful. It's my job to let them know, cool, that's dope. Also, here's a space where you can go deeper than just reading that book in a book club, or deeper than, right? The book club served its purpose. The event served its purpose. And maybe its purpose was just to do that, to introduce you. It was to maybe radicalize you. And each one organization can't do all the things. So then it's my job. All right, cool. Then how do I take advantage of this? Hey, y'all. And to Kamal's point, right? You show up, you pull up and be like, this is dope. And this is what we do. So if you want to take a step further, come over here. And there's going to be more steps. And ideally, that person will continue, keep taking steps until they land at the place that feels like it's the right fit for them.
Thank you. So we covered some of the political education. I gave y'all the bullet points. So we covered a little bit of political education. So I don't want to focus on that one too much. But I do have a question about data and research and data collection. And this is more what Hiram's organization does. And I don't honestly know how much of this CMB does. So I would love to be enlightened a little bit as to whether or not this is part of the goal. So, as you all know that, this this map thing has kind of gotten a little out of control, which I wasn't really expecting when, when I started doing the research. And I just got a lovely little email, thanks Dr. Ball, from some person who like wrote up a whole dissertation about like why I could be wrong. But I feel like I said I could be wrong when I did the presentation and that I hadn't gone back, too far before 2020, but we'll leave that there. I'll answer.
Is that what that was?
Oh, you didn't read what
I didn't
he
read...
sent to his organization.
Oh was, no!
Oh
yeah,
wow!
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what. That's
and
why
he wasn't rude about it, but he was basically questioning whether or not I had actually proved my hypothesis. But I felt like I was very clear that I wasn't certain that I had proved my hypothesis. That what I instead did was confirm that there was something to be further looked at, which was kind of my whole purpose.
Look, I have to admit, when I don't see a greeting in the email, I'm biased by that. I mean, say what's up, say hello. Like we don't know each other like that. So when I didn't see that, I was just like, let me just pass this on. He's not trying to reach Renee anyway.
It's all good. It's all good.
All right, my bad. Okay, good.
I've started my next level of research, and thank you, Hiram, for the idea. And we got a whole conversation that we need to have. But anywho, so as far as like data collection, research, actually like finding information, for me this is really important because I feel like a lot of the problem is people don't have time to do that, right? Like you have a job, you have kids, you have whatever other things, and 8,000 things are going on in your life. Like who has time to search the entire country to figure out how many COP facilities have been built in the past 4 years, right? Like that's just not something most people have the capacity to do. So Hiram, if you don't mind starting, just because this is really like a huge tool for your organization, the research piece and pulling information, how important is research, data collection, trying to really pull together information, to provide something to present, right? Like how important is that in the role of like an organization or a community organizing capacity?
Research is a key tenet in the campaign process, right? A lot of folks do research. Now, what level of research is done? I mean, even activists do certain levels of research because it's important. You can feel some type of way about something. You can feel like, yo, this is wrong. This doesn't feel right. This is bad. But you have to go research that, right? You have to go figure it out. And to your point, there's a certain level of like base level research that everyone should do, just to educate themselves on the issue and the facts, because you have to, again, there's a process of educating the folks that you're working with, right? There is crafting messaging, because you have to engage in that battle of ideas, right? Crafting the messaging, you are developing your strategy. All that is based off research. How deep of research you're willing to go and need, now that is where you get into the limitations of one's capacity or organizational capacities as to what they can and cannot do. But very simply, research is something that everybody should be doing in their organizing. If you're an organizer or even if you're an activist, research is really important. Organizations like mine exist to be able to support folks in that super deep dive research because they just don't have the capacity or access to folks who can do that level of research and at a quick turnaround time to help craft the messaging, the demands, the strategy, the tactics, the talking points for their campaigns. So it plays a crucial role in organizing campaigns.
I'll say quickly. So yeah, we engage in a level of research, and sometimes I'll call reconnaissance even on the things that we are doing, what we're working against. As Hiram said, it's about countering the propaganda of the enemy a lot of times. Sometimes, and again, you just don't know what's going to hit people, right? Some people will be hit more by vague understandings or notions. Other people want to see where those things are coming from and what the actual facts are as a way for them to see how serious you are, right? Or you just somebody who will sprout anything or say anything that sounds good in the moment, but you can never back it up with any facts or statistics or whatever. So I think the idea of research and reconnaissance can be extremely important. But I also think you can, as I think the first thing, sort of to bring it full circle, we can also get lost in data, like as in anything, right? We can get lost in the idea that just because we know something is true and we've proved it by pointing out some important timeline or bullet points, and you present it and people go like, yeah, okay, thank you for your chart. I kind of knew that already because the cops just stopped me, you know, the other day. So I knew they were harassing me. I appreciate your stop and frisk numbers. That shows me how big the problem is. You know, but people sometimes can also get off on that because that's funding. That's the rest of it that comes with a model that goes astray. But obviously, in the sort of the day-to-day work of the organizer, of the organization, you need facts. You need to know that you're countering a narrative. You need to know that you're getting good reconnaissance on what the other side is doing, and how that makes you move in ways in which you would not have otherwise. So, of course, those things are extremely important. We are actually doing a deep dive research project now into the Atlanta Police Foundation to try to bring more exposure to sort of its tentacles in terms of how much influence it has here in Atlanta, right? So there's been a lot of conversations, there's been some articles, but we've decided to do a deep dive research project that can do more exposing of what that Atlanta Police Foundation is. So it's taken out of the idea like, oh, this is just some simple nonprofit that wants to train police. It's like, no, this is being set up to make sure that funding continuously not only goes to policing and policing agencies, but funding to do what? Funding to surveil, funding to militarize, funding to lobby, to make sure that the people who they want in office get in office, funding to take control. So having that deep dive research and information helps you, hopefully, in terms of the larger struggle of getting out points and counterpoints to propaganda narratives.
Yeah, right on. So in the last less than 29 minutes before we make way for warrior class, there was couple topics that came up I wanted to see if we could come back to at least for a minute. One of which was this issue of age. And as at least some of us on screen are getting a little older, at least some of us, I won't speak for everybody, at least some of us, I'm reminded. So I'll ask the question using my own self-deprecating example. So I came back from the Navy, having read everything in print about Malcolm. So therefore I felt I understood and was ready for everything. And I did have a little bit of an arrogant attitude, almost like the revolution was waiting for me. You know, like I'm here now. What's up? Like, and part of it was also a little bit of being in the military and just seeing how well organized our opposition is and resourced and willing to do things that most of us aren't willing to do. And I especially looking back, I can say I came in with even when I was quiet in meetings, it was a bubbling quiet in the back of the room. Like, what is going on? As I've gotten a little older, then in a couple years after that, I ran into the late Damu Smith, who was putting together Black Voices for Peace in DC, and joined that, and quickly felt that it was too soft, and me and my little crew of younger folks were more studied and revolutionary, and we oversimplifying. We went to Damu directly. It was like, my man, we need to break away. We need you need to. And he did the whole thing. Ella Baker said the same thing. SNCC needs to be out from under SCLC. And he told us the same thing. Go do your own thing. He was like, salute. He would later tell me privately, you got to let that happen, because sometimes the youth do go off and do good things, but sometimes they just need to go off and figure things. They need to realize what's what. All right. So that said, I don't know if I have I'm just interested in your experiences, particularly as we've all been in this a little bit. I think both of you much more than me, but in terms of being in these spaces, being around these efforts and movements, having grown up a little bit I certainly feel that way now. That when I get sometimes when I get challenged by younger people, I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Don't let me stand in your way. Like I'm the problem now. Go get it. But I also sometimes feel at the same time, what you've also said, I think we need, because Kamal, when you mentioned gangs, churches, they have accepted hierarchies. That one of the reasons why they're able, and I feel like within our movements today, there's a struggle with accepting hierarchy and a struggle with accepting authority. And I tend to think some of that is necessary, albeit there's been obvious abuses of that historically. So I don't necessarily have a question, but what do you all think about any or all of that? Oh wait, do I need to bring you back on, Renee? My bad. My bad. I didn't okay.
All good. I was quietly waiting.
And then one thing I say is, Jared, yes, right there's going to be times where folks just have to go learn on their own and not learn, right? Make mistakes. And it's never on your own. As long as you maintain the relationship, folks know they can come back and process that. Organizing is learned by trial and error. I can send you through my 8-week school and I can download all this stuff to you. Can you actually go do that? That's a whole nother question, because based off the context and conditions in your area, it may look different. It has to be adapted. And so you have to go through that process of making mistakes for sometimes things to fully land and for you to get that experience. And if you have the fortune of having someone who has more experience, regardless of age, who has more experience, who can guide you through that process and help you explain and help you understand where the mistakes were made or process those things, then that is the number one way to really get it. It's not going to be one person drilling you and telling you do exactly this. It doesn't work like that. And so what we have acknowledged is, right. And that is the role of young people, right? Revolution is the task of the young. That is, it's young people's business, right? And you have to allow younger people. I mean, I'm not that old. I fall in this middle, Yelder area, right? But come on, I know you ain't talking, dog, because I mean, you have to allow the young people to go through that process. You have to allow, and not just young, there's also older folks who come into realization and come into knowledge new and are totally, and you have to allow that. It has to be broken. Yaki Sales talked about this, right? The breaking of the allure and the pedestal upon which we hold the bourgeois state. There's a lot of breaking that has to happen for folks. And that is an individual process a lot of times, but they're held in a space. Again, the organizers, right? Create space for people to take courageous action. Allow them that space to go through that process and do that with you there to help process when it's time to come back and be able to do. So that's all I would say about that.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm also of the thinking, and I'll go a little more deeper into it. Part of the challenge is that we need organizations that are big enough to challenge the state, or at least a critical mass of people or organization that can lay real challenges. And then that takes structure. That takes some level of hierarchy. That takes some resources, whatever you want to define as resources. We won't defeat the state simply because we have a community organization. We won't defeat the state even if we just simply have a national organization. We need national, international, and we may need 2, 3, 4 different organizations which can join a coalition. So we need to size up our organizations. And so to me, that's been a particular barrier, again, in this period of struggle. Again, not one that is simply because people don't get it, but because people or organizations have been attacked, because people in organizations have sort of been led astray to go after other things as opposed to keeping their organizations together. And I think it also has to do with not exclusively a different type of youth organizing culture, but it also has to do with the idea that we are not getting that level of friction correct, as in, can you leave and still keep in good contact or still have good relations, right? Sometimes we definitely have situations where the break is hard, and the break means distrust, and the break means we don't get to talk anymore for some period of time. I think those things do a damage to the larger movement building, of course. Whether or not those things are based on what the state imposes, or whether or not it's brought on by our own individual arrogance from both the so-called elder and or the young person, right? Combination thereof. But I agree that a lot of movement activity has to be driven by younger people, right? That there's, I don't do even in terms of my own organizing, which again has caused friction even within CMB in Atlanta, which I think most of you guys I've talked to about. Someone tried to suggest that I wasn't on the ground anymore. And I was like, no, I'm not. I did that for 30 years. And now my role is different in terms of what I do for the organization. Obviously, I'm here and I do some things on the ground, but my role now is not to do what I did 30 years ago. Like, either as an individual, that means that I haven't grown, but that would also mean as an organization, or any organization hasn't grown, if the person is doing the same thing they did when they first started to join organizations. Again, the idea that organizations are multifaceted, structured, that they do different things and have different ways in which they attack issues has to be looked upon as a growth of an organization. Everybody is not going to be doing the same thing, because if they are, then that means you really only have 5 people in your organization. And no organization that has 5 people is truly going to be able to challenge the state. And so even though I agree completely with folks having to restart things, by the time I was 28 or 29, I started like 4 different types of organizations. I started college organizations. I started people of color organizations, Black organizations. I joined different organizations to figure out which way was the path for me. I was in the Malcolm X grassroots movement and New African Peoples Organization for about 17 years. And when that path ended, at one point I thought, well, maybe I won't be organizing anymore. But then I started Community Movement Builders because I felt there were still things that I wanted to get accomplished and do. So even as an older person, sometimes you still think that you are in a position based on your own experiences to say, I want to continue this work and do it the way that maybe I thought somebody else wasn't doing it, right? But again, try to maintain relationships throughout that with your former organization, which may not always be easy. So some of this, I think, is the natural growth and the things that we on the left, I want to say natural. I think we on the left have become accustomed to splits. And in some ways, I think they're even encouraged, as somehow there's some good dialectical reason for them to happen. So I do think that sometimes they should happen, but I think the amount that happens in the left is by no means an accident. And I think some of it is because of what the state is doing, but I also think it's the internal contradictions that we have not figured out how to deal with in terms of even relationships with each other, to allow growth to happen and to even allow differences within an organization to remain differences, but to keep the core together. So I always say part of the role of an organizer, to me, particularly an organizer or someone who's in an organization who considers themselves an organizer, in addition to bringing people to organizing, it is to keep the center going. It is to keep the organization going. Again, you being right and the organization splitting or changing or breaking up, to me, is not progress necessarily. Obviously, there's some things that fall outside of that, but for the most part, keeping the organization together and understanding that there's going to be wings of organizations. Some people are going to be more this or more that, even in parties, even in cadres, right? Some people are going to be more this than that. But keeping the organization going and keeping it building is the essential function if your real job is to challenge the state, right? If your real job is to resist, if your real job is to organize against capitalism and white supremacy, then you have to have the vehicles in which to do that. And if your vehicle is constantly breaking down, you're going to get rolled right over, right? So I said it to say that yes, young people got to explore and do their thing, but at its core, if organizations are not building, they are dying. If they're not adding people, more people that leave, then those organizations are not going to be functional for the purposes of mobilizing and bringing radical change for our community.
I like Yelda. I might start using that.
Yelda, yeah.
Kamal did not just make that phase.
No, only because you're a lot younger looking than Hiram, so you're not a Yelda yet. I don't know I don't know where the Y in his thing comes from.
I'm almost 50 years old, y'all.
Oh my God, you look so much younger.
I haven't earned elder status yet. You know,
no, that's true.
I haven't earned elder status yet.
That is true. Some people just get old. Some people just get old.
Yeah, I haven't earned that status. The one thing I'll say is the importance of culture inside organizations, right? And that folks do feel like their contributions, their experiences, as little as large as they may be, are respected in their space, and that they're held in that, right? It's not sort of like the woo-woo, shishi woo-woo sort of self-care sort of thing, but that there's a culture, revolutionary culture that we abide by, that grounds our accountability and relationship building to each other, right? So that it can hold that, because it's through that, because we have to understand as an organizer, part of the fun is that, and I worked with high school students, 14 to 19 years old, for 13 years. Part of the fun, and what I told folks, is when you teach them this organizing and you arm them with this language, the first people they're going to use it on is you. It's coming back at you first. And you have to weather that storm. And Dr. Ball, you probably get some of that. You'll be in class, and by the end of the semester, you got some students who's back, coming back at you, challenging you. You know,
end of the semester. I'm first week with it, Hiram. First week.
And that's the fun of it, right? You have to like that's the fun of it, because like they're engaging with it, they're listening, and they're trying it on, and they feel safe. And it can be abrasive, it's abusive, and a lot of times, and some, but it's fun. There's times when it is problematic because of the country we live in. Most of these young folks have been politicized, radicalized through these nonprofit spaces, through these academic institutions. There's a heavy individualism. There's the need, what we talked about way early on in this show, this movement that's given so much visibility, and this sense of power or whatever has really corrupted a lot of folks, and they can't do away with that. This is where the true political education comes in. Spouting quotes and facts isn't going to deal with that. It's analyzing, right? And teaching people how to think. And the revolutionary culture that we build inside, like Cabral says, allows for that, and for you to be able to weather that when it does happen, because it's going to happen. There was a proverb, I think it's like a Ghanaian proverb that I will butcher, but it was basically like, if you don't initiate the young, they'll burn down the village just to feel its warmth. And the young people don't feel like they have a place, or they're cared for, or they are being, intentionally developed with respect, with love, with pride, and they themselves also have a space where they can teach back, then what they're going to do is implode things and tear it down, because they don't know what else to do in order to feel that validation, to feel seen, to feel whatever. And so those of us who are older in age also have to remember what it was like to be young, what it was like to be really passionate, excited, full of ideas. You're trying to figure it all out, right? And respect that and give space to it, while also helping give guidance. And that's the best way you're able to, like, there's going to be some folks whose minds, of course, are just corrupted, and they're going to do those types of things. They're just going to have to go. And hopefully they come back for that clean glass of water, because your job is always be the clean glass of water.
Yes. We, when Jared came up to Jersey, we had a great little experience with my youngins, because I have been working with high school students now some 20-something years. So I feel that, and I like to encourage that conversation, and you're absolutely right. If you don't give them a path, it is definitely going to come back and bite you later. So this is I really appreciate that you both came on. There was a question about why BAP isn't here, and Ricky has been invited.
First of all, no disrespect
but
to
you
Ricky
are,
and
right.
I'm in both. So African period, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what, but I always hate those kind of questions. Like, I mean, you never know how these shows get background put together, who was asked, who was available.
Yeah.
And it's always, why is so-and-so not here? Enjoy who is. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And Ricky was initially invited when I tried to set this all up, and she was in Cuba, and it kept getting moved around, and so, you know, stuff happens, but Ricky knows she can jump on whenever she wants. Like, that is not a thing.
But we lowered Lucretia's blood pressure, so
there
thanks
we
everybody,
go.
and thank you, Lucretia, for
Thank
that
you,
too.
Lucretia.
You know? And then thanks, Librarian, thanks for the conversation. Yes, people, please do, if you got something for Daruba, he still needs whatever help we can get him. There's no pension plan for revolutionaries. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, missed it. My aunt was at the door asking if I wanted a bottle of water. You know what I'm saying? It feels good being home. You know what I mean?
She heard all the references to clean glass of water. She was like, let me see if my baby needs some water.
There we go.
Good to be home. Do we have time for this? I think you highlighted, you wanted us to, is building the Black community internally without influence or preview outside of the Black African FUBU activism organization. Where does that lie in the scheme? Is building the Black community internally without influence or preview outside of the Black African. Do you all? I'm not sure.
Here was what I took from the question, and the reason I asked. So, and then again, conversations that I have all the time. Like, I try to remind people that Black people are a very small percentage of the population in this country. So we're already fighting a huge battle internally in the country as Black people, because we're not like a big portion. What I took from the question is, can you fight a battle as an organization for liberation without at all including or addressing people who live and breathe outside of the Black community? Now, I could have been misreading that question, but what I took from it was how does it work in the scheme of this organizing? How do you include people who are not Black in your organizing structure if the goal is Black liberation? Like, is that doable? Is that possible? Like, BAP has, they have their side, organization that you can help if you're not Black, right? And so I know organizations that do that. So I could be
BAP
completely
has an allies contingent too.
Right. And so I could be completely misreading the question, granted, but that was what I took from the question, and I thought it was something that was worth talking about if we had time to address it.
I think so. I think it depends on the goals of the organization. And right, organizations have principled unity and principled struggle. So it's totally possible for Black folks, what we understand to be Black folks in this country, to organize Black organizations for Black people in Black communities and focus on Black struggle. I think through the political education, right? And again, it depends on what the goal is, right? What the goal of the organization is. So if it's to win reforms for the Black community or whatever, then that's one thing. If it is to overthrow the state, that may be something else. Doesn't necessarily mean that you would have to include people into your organizations, but then that's where the principled unity and the principled struggle comes in with who are those other organizations who align on this vision with you, right? To be able to do that. But I don't think it's a requirement for Black organizations to incorporate non-Black people, and however you're defining Black, right? Because Black gets defined now, not now, that's always been a thing, differently for some folks, right? But I don't think it's a requirement to have to do that. It just gets to that point where you're organizing your work has attained a level where you are, to Kamal's point, you're challenging the state or you're doing something else. That's going to require more people because there's just not enough numbers. I think it is a driving force, right? It is a revolutionary force, and probably the most revolutionary force in this country to be able to do that. But it's not going to be able to do it alone. And that's where principled unity and principled struggle comes in, without requiring folks to have to join Black organizations.
Yeah, really quickly, like international solidarity or solidarity outside of organizations is key, because again, these organizations are too small by themselves. Capital was international. Capital just doesn't come into your neighborhood, and that's how it functions, right? The same people who oppress us here are oppressing other people in other ways. Again, capitalism has a whole bunch of different institutions governing and otherwise to make sure it stays on top. If your narrow analysis makes you think that your organization of 20, 30, 50 people or exclusively Black people is going to defeat that, then my suggestion is that you have to go back and read some more books, right? You have to read Beloved. But I agree completely with Hiram. Obviously, you can have Black organizations and that are fighting for Black people, but the question becomes, what is the unity outside of those organizations that helps extend your reach, extend your further goals? Because again, capital just won't let you maroon yourself and be like, oh, I'm free over here. Yay. The system doesn't work like that. It's never worked like that. It never will work like that. So figuring out what your larger strategy is for liberation, that maybe, again, some members of your organization, they may be the international representatives to deal with other folks that you may not want to deal with, right? And that just has to be divided up and thought through about how you deal with those other organizations and or formations which share similar lenses, but organized differently or in different communities or from different places. You may be a community-based organization. Somebody else may be a labor organization. Obviously, if there's a concentric circle of things that we're trying to accomplish, then there has to be ways in which we understand what solidarity means so that we can work effectively to fight back against capital.
Look how professionally done that was. Right on time.
Right on time.
All that New York Times, Roland Martin visits that prepare you for that media training. Hey, Renee, thank you very much for putting this together. Hiram, Kamal, thank you very much for coming through as usual. Any last quick shots before we get out of here for Warrior Class? Good people. Thanks to the remixers as well.
Just the thing. Thanks to you both. I know it was hectic trying to coordinate the schedules, but I really appreciate this conversation. I've actually taken a lot more away from this conversation, me personally, than I even expected, and I expected to take away a lot. So I appreciate it.
I feel quite the opposite. I think the audience took away more than I did. This was you're welcome, everybody, for what we provided you.
I can't stand y'all.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this. Is a great conversation, and hopefully we can have it again and incorporate more from the chat and from the audience and bring them into the conversation as well. And so, but definitely look us up. We have our George Jackson School. It operates 2 times a year. So communityresourcehub.org. That's where you can hit us up. The website looks trash, but we're fixing it. Don't worry about it.
That's a hell of a promo. We'll put the link in the description anyway. But
we can do that. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really important. And just want to end with the timepiece. Organizers start meetings on time. You end on time, because time is a justice issue. Respect people's time and self.
See y'all at Warrior Class. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, links to their organizations will be in the show description. Thanks again, everybody. See you next week on Saturday with Renee.